Greetings ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Mexi here once again, and I am back for the likes of the Mexi Toys videos. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of Sonic the Hedgehog, or most people call it Sonic the Hedgehog 2006 for the Xbox 360/PlayStation 3. So, last time, we've essentially manage able to showcase the forms of the next piece of DLC, and that's what appears to be Boss Attack Sonic, and oh no, we actually did that no problem, despite the fact that we actually stumbled across into that particular glitch from the likes of the forms of the Cerberus boss fight. Clearly because no matter what though, I somehow over-rely on the forms of those specific gems. Specifically, the red gem most likely to slow down time. Although, to be fair though, it's about the fact that we actually got ourselves a pretty good rank all in all, which appears to be the forms of the A rank. So, that's besides the point. So today, for this video, is about the fact that we're going to be moving on to the next boss attack, and this time, it's Shadow's turn. So of course, as we expected, we'll go for the exact same bosses as before, and relatively speaking, we always have to start things off as in Cerberus, and eventually it ends off with the forms of Mephiles Phase 2. So, and of course, just like in Boss Attack Sonic, it's about the fact that obviously we have to come across into enemy, defeat all the enemies kind of syndrome every once in a while. So, nothing too special about this, aside from the fact that, well, every once in a while, as you can tell, enemies now show up. And on top of all that stuff, though, is about the fact that, well, you get the idea for this point. So, anyway, and as it turns out, it's about the fact that, well, if you couldn't tell already, it's about the fact that, well, today's date, of course, is the 29th of March today. In some cases, in 2024 today. So, naturally speaking, it's about the fact that there's some bunch of stuff I would like to mention about. But, unfortunately, though, we have to wait for a little while. Because, as you can tell, I'm just trying to concentrate, just trying to actually try to deal with the Cerberus for a while. So, just I'm sure for the fact that, yeah, just like in Boss Attack Sonic, sometimes, though, in the beginning portion of the fight, sometimes the Cerberus likes to turn around very, very early on, whilst as soon as we're able to actually get onto the last hit of the Cerberus, I believe he'll turn around for about approximately 3 times. So because of that though, yeah, nothing else to really say about this, I guess, aside from the fact that I'm pretty sure we've almost done in terms of the forms of the boss attacks for the entire DLC content, before we move on to the final set of contents. In terms of the forms of the entire DLC department for Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, and I'm sure enough though is about the fact that we'll explain more about it if we somehow managed able to get started with the forms of the 4th month in 2024. That's of course April, so we can pretty much guarantee for the fact that it won't give me that much trouble, I don't think. Well, there might be a couple of times that we might come across into technical glitches from time to time, although it's not so much of a fact that we're probably not going to come across into them for a certain amount of time, until whenever we get onto the forms of the very hard missions eventually. So, relatively speaking, I was about the fact that I can't even believe by saying this, is about the fact that this entire playthrough of Sonic the Hedgehog 2006 so far, in terms of the forms of the redo Let's Play as far as I'm aware, it actually goes by a lot better than I was expecting. I mean, no matter what though, it's about the fact that, sure, no matter what though, we've actually come across into the forms of some very complicated things we can able to discuss upon, specifically though when it comes to story, and on top of all that stuff though, how the fact that I can usually describe about how unpolished this game can be. And relatively speaking, I was about the fact you probably get the idea from that point. So yeah, he turns around twice, so, and this is what makes about the fact that the Cerberus boss fight in Shadow's boss attack gets a little bit difficult though. And that's what appears to be about the fact that for some odd reason, every time when I was trying to able to actually get back onto its horn, sometimes, I will admit though right away, the camera angle always screws me up, and on top of all that stuff though is about the fact that Shadow's homing attack wasn't exactly the most reliable thing to try to cooperate with it, because most of the time though is about the fact that he just straight up homing attack and right onto its head sometimes. So relatively speaking, it's about the fact that's one of the most annoying moments in Journey forms of the Cerberus boss fight, in Journey forms of it not only from the likes of the regular run through, of the Cerberus boss fight in Shadow Story, but also in boss attack variation as well. And speaking of which though, this is the true definition of the final time we can able to actually deal with the Cerberus, next to the forms of Silver the Hedgehog eventually, and as well as from that, Mephiles Phase 1, as well as Mephiles Phase 2, and even Iblis Phase 2. So because of that though, thank goodness for that. Well, to be more accurate though, thank goodness for the sake of the forms of Iblis Phase 2, because my god, that particular boss fight is boring. Which, I've already on about that ever since Journey forms have been not only in Sonic Story, but also on Shadow Story as well. Which then again is about the fact that Silver, who's the only one, never actually come across into Iblis Phase 2. My guess is about the fact that it usually heavily rely on the forms of, well, I don't know about you, because it has been about 2 days ago since I actually have last played this game for sure. I mean, relatively speaking though, it's about the fact that I'm pretty sure that we've almost done showing everything else off, well, in terms of the forms of Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, aside from the fact that we're probably going to be able to miss out on, you know, like I mentioned this before, we're probably not going to tackle through every single town missions, and on top of all that stuff though, I don't suppose we're not going to be able to actually show off the harder variants for certain stages. Like, if you manage to beat the level for the first time, during the course of the actual episode select, basically though, the hard difficulty mode has actually been unlocked during the course of some stages. Well, there are some exceptions here and there, which appears to be by the forms of Wave Ocean for Tails, as well as Tropical Jungle for Rouge, and even Wave Ocean for Blaze, but that's just mainly because no matter what though, it did say mission as opposed to normal or hard mode. So, no matter what though, is about the fact that I'm pretty sure this could be also applies for the forms of the end of the world, because goodness gracious, imagine if hard difficulty setting, or even very hard difficulty comes into play during the course of the end of the world level. My goodness, it'll be a nightmare, especially noticeable because of the forms of the stupid time warp holes system, and on top of all that stuff though, is about the fact that I could imagine for the fact that, well, at least generally speaking, I was about the fact that the end of the world does technically has a checkpoint if you do manage to complete one of those sections, which you probably already know what to expect. So, yeah, everything else will become to expect at that point. So, anyway, and suffice to pointing out is about the fact that, yes indeed, is about the fact that recently, that Stuart, in some cases, kept King 74, he recently finished up the entire story, well, to be more specifically, the main story for the likes of the forms of Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix. So, as a result, congrats to him, by the way, especially noticeable because he did a remarkable job in regards to the forms of trying to able to tackle through Kingdom Hearts 2, basically. So, because of that, though, all needs left right now is, of course, additional content, which appears to be by the forms of, let's just say, the Goddess of Fate, well, let's just say, the Final Cup in Journey forms of you know, Olympus Coliseum, and on top of that, there's also going to be some of these additional stuff. To be more specifically, Mushroom 13, as well as the forms of some data versions of specifically the organization data battles, and of course the secret super duper final boss, or specifically the secret boss that is actually going to be really tough to beat. And on top of that, some of these Keyblades to able to get equipped, to be more specifically, the ultimate weapon, for I've heard anyway. So, relatively speaking, I was about the fact that, at least luckily though, on, not only on the original PlayStation 2 version of mine, but also on the PlayStation 4 version as well, that I somehow already managed to able to get myself ultimate weapon. So just to ensure for the fact I can get myself the greatest Keyblade ever. All I will say is about the fact that Divisive Pumpkin is still, without a doubt, is the best Keyblade in the entire game, in my opinion. Not only because of how the fact that you can able to pull off some devastating combos for, specifically for certain boss fights, and even with mob fights or anything else like that. So, relatively speaking, I can classify for saying for the fact that at least Ultimate Weapon is pretty darn close. Especially noticeable because, well, despite the fact that it's been a very long while since I actually have last played Kingdom Hearts 2, for the likes of the forms of specifically the PlayStation 3 version, just because I will admit though right away, it is very difficult to go back onto the PlayStation 3 version now, mainly because the PS3 version suffers the forms of some bad load times and even with buffering issues. To be more specifically, if you come across into certain boss fights like Lock Scene, as well as the forms of some Drive Forms transformation, I mean, it does manage to help you for a bit if you manage able to get some of these, well, invincibility frames decides to kick in or something. Well, that's besides the point, I guess. Well, then again, it has been quite some time since I actually have last played that game, because obviously, once summer is approaching, or to be more accurate though, is that, well, generally speaking, it's about the fact that once the December decides to roll around, during the forms of in 2024, I can potentially try to say is about the fact that we can able to celebrate not only the 10th anniversary of the Super Smash Bros. For the Wii U, well, to be more accurate though, sometime in November in this year, but it's also about the fact that we can able to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Kingdom Hearts HD 2.5 remakes for the PlayStation 3 version. So hopefully I'm also trying to able to get onto the PS3 version at one point, just to ensure I can able to easily try to catch up. Well, in terms of the forms of progression, well, in addition with the forms of some trophies grinding as well, wish me luck I suppose, in regards to the forms of trying to able to tackle through critical mode on the PlayStation 3 version, just because, as I mentioned this before, the loading times on the PlayStation 3 version is pretty bad. Similar to the forms of how it does it in the PSP version of Birth by Sleep, as long as you were able to download the actual install data thing. So that way it can actually reduce the load times depending on what specific playthroughs you go into. So, although it's kind of unfortunate for me though that I somehow managed able to got, you know, actually access the forms of some fast loading times between both Terra and Aqua, except Ventus, because no matter what though, I didn't pay attention to the forms of the main menu screen at first glance. So, but I digress. So as you can tell, this is the final time we're going to be able to try to deal with Iblis Phase 2, because thank goodness, because like I said before, once we're done with him for reals, obviously I'm not going to touch this boss fight ever again. Especially noticeable because again, it's awfully slow, and on top of that, it's also incredibly boring too. Although, I just realized about the fact that he does this particular attack this time around way earlier than he forms of how he does it since the, well, the last hit points decides to come in. So, that's always swell. And something tells me is about the fact that once we deal with the forms of Iblis Phase 2, I believe we'll instantly jump right into Mephiles Phase 1. I'm pretty sure that's where it's at. Speaking of the forms of Mephiles Phase 1, as the actual boss fight itself, in boss attack mode to be more specifically, I think you only gonna have to come across into one particular phase, rather than just two separate playable characters departments, because you're only going to be playing as Shadow for the majority of this mode, because I don't think it's possible we can able to play as E123 Omega, but I'm sure enough though is about the fact that we'll play as the multitude of playable characters for the final time, if we manage to able to tackle through the most challenging parts in terms of the forms of this entire DLC for Sonic 06, and as of course, very hard missions, which, to be more specifically though, is about the fact that we're most able to tackle through not only 9 stages again in Sonic's story, but also 8 stages again in both Shadows and Silver stories, making a grand total of, let's just say, I don't know about you, because potentially speaking though, I haven't exactly actually access to my calculator for quite some time, and as you can tell, yeah, we somehow dive right into Mephiles Phase 1, after, you know, Iblis Phase 2, because obviously no matter what though, it still managed to take place in Flame Core after all, so we can pretty much guarantee for the fact that we can able to actually just to make the entire structure pretty self-explanatory. So, and also as you can tell, there's actually now some of these little fire circles now shows up in the entire arena, so meaning about the fact that this is going to be a little bit tricky. Well, still, I found this particular boss fight, still it's pretty easy if you pretty much know exactly what to do, assuming of course you do need to able to carry some rings with you, because otherwise if you don't have rings with you, obviously your score count will reset into 0, and I'm pretty sure the checkpoint has already been active if you move on to the next boss fight. So I'm pretty sure that's what I was going to be thinking about anyway. So, but if you dare lose all of your lives though, obviously much like the forms of Team Attack Amigo, in addition to the forms of the End of the World last story segment as well, basically though you have to restart this entire progress all over again. And it seems kind of weird about the fact that when it comes to the forms of the entire DLC for Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, well, to be more specifically though, is that for some DLC ranging from Team Attack Amigo, alongside with the forms of boss attacks with Sonic, Shadow, and Silver, basically though, the entire record does not save. So, as a result, imagine this, right? I somehow managed able to get myself a glorious A rank in Journey forms within Sonic's boss attack, and as a result that particular record does not usually become savable during the forms of that particular records department, whilst unlike the very hard missions, it does manage to save. So because of that though, I just don't understand why about the forms of how in fact what the save system actually plays out to be, for the sake of the majority of the DLC as far as the entire things itself is concerned. Well, beggars can't be choosers, I suppose. I mean, it's good for a laugh, I guess. Especially noticeable, again, unless if you're very curious like I do. Especially noticeable unless if you don't waste your money on. Especially noticeable, it's probably best you can able to save up for, you know, upcoming Nintendo Switch stuff. To be more specifically, you know, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door. Speaking of Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, actually, there was actually a new trailer just came up, and my goodness, the intro cutscene looks a lot more stunning this time around. Like, do you guys even remember, back in Journey forms of sometime in January, in this year in particular, they did somehow release the actual video of the fully animated cutscene, in the opening cutscene I should say, in Mario vs. Donkey Kong, right? Well, as it turns out, in Journey forms of been just recently, we've also got the exact same treatment in Journey forms of Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door remake, and I'm gonna say, it looks super duper gorgeous, able to see fully animated cutscenes, Journey forms of specifically once you open up the book and stuff like that. I mean, my goodness, it is amazing. So, I'm still looking forward to able to replay for the entire game again, except on a different platform. And relatively speaking, I was about the fact that I just love to compare not only the original release on the GameCube, but also with the Switch remake as well. So, it feels like no matter what though, is that someone actually did point things out about the fact that while looking back in Journey forms of in 2004, that the majority of the cutscenes, including the opening cutscene with the forms of both Mario vs. Donkey Kong and Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, that both original releases did manage to able to have still images, well, to be more specifically, still pictures, whilst compared to the forms of right now, in this year in 2024, it looks like we're about to be able to be seeing fully animated cutscenes, which is pretty nice to see. Especially noticeable because of how amazing the presentations look now. Especially noticeable because, relatively speaking, though, it's just about the fact that it's a shame about the fact that in Mario vs. Donkey Kong's case, that basically though is that we miss any of the, you know, the original charm to the original version of, you know, with the forms of the Italian gibberish kind of language. Well, beggars can't be choosers, I guess, like I said before, especially notable because not every single remakes can be perfect by any means of any stretch of your imagination, but still, regardless of such though, it does its job. So either way, the next thing I want to talk about is about the fact that, relatively speaking though, is about the fact that apparently though, there's actually a new leak has been going on, and as a result, it appears to be involved around Sonic the Hedgehog of all things. And as it turns out, it's about the fact that the next game is going to be approaching at some point, and that's what it appears to be called Sonic Toys Party. And as a result, yeah, the actual leak of the trailer did somehow showed up at one point, and as a result, the entire gameplay plays pretty similar to Fall Guys, except the fact that it's all around Sonic the Hedgehog theme. So because of that though, yeah, that's as far as I can try to able to explain any of this. Also, I just realized we able to actually ended up in the exact same arena as the forms of how it does it in the Egg Wyvern boss fight, except now we don't have to worry about the forms of that particular Egg Wyvern himself, especially noticeable because, as you can tell, the arena itself, it kind of reminds me of the forms of that particular familiar boss arena ever since in Shadow the Hedgehog if you try to take care of the forms of the Egg Dealer boss fight, not only for the sake of the forms of the Lava Shelter level, but also with the Black Comet, and even especially noticeable with Cosmic Fall as well, because obviously it does manage to take place like a square shaped and the actual center of the platform. Although, mind you, we start things off in the center platform by any means, but if you try to able to deal with more enemy encounters, then obviously you can pretty much guarantee you have to deal with that particular homing attack situation with the forms that beetle enemies. So just in case you can able to go from one place to the other, so that's besides the point. So anyway, and as you can tell, this is going to be the final time we're going to be dealing with Silver right here, especially noticeable because once we're done with Silver, then obviously at this point in time is that once we move on to Silver's boss attack mode, oh jeez, I totally forgot that Silver can able to do a quick dash ability right there, which, yeah, I was not expecting to see that coming, but either way. But as you can tell, right from the get-go on this boss fight right there, I did somehow immediately homing attack into him as soon as he jumps in midair, and as a result, that actually deals some bit of damage, which as a result, yeah, I did somehow manage to able to look on that, of that specific trick, and as a result, it does manage to require me to able to do some bit of timing that is involved, so relatively speaking, that's as far as I can try to able to explain any of it. So, relatively speaking, it's about the fact that you pretty much get the idea about the fact that when it comes to the forms of Sonic Toys Party, and sure enough though, it does kind of remind me of Fall Guys, except the fact that obviously it's going to be releasing on mobile devices rather than console variants for the likes of Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One, or even Xbox Series X or Series S, or even with the forms of PlayStation 5, or even PC Steam, or even the upcoming Nintendo next Nintendo console eventually in the future, which as a result is a bit difficult to tell at this point, because truth be told, like I said before, it was just a leak after all. So because of that though, also I just realized about the fact that whenever I've seen the actual leaked trailer of the forms of Sonic Toys Party, as it turns out, the menu sound effects, for what I've heard anyway, it sounds awfully familiar when every time whenever you do manage to able to jump into the title screen, and if you tap the screen, I actually heard that particular familiar sound effect goes like, goo, which appears to be the forms of the exact same sound effects if you're trying to able to confirm the selection for Sonic 06. So, and I was like, I was not expecting to see that coming, or even I just hear that coming. Especially noticeable because the last time we actually heard that particular sound effects was back in 2006, in of course, Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, so what a coincidence, huh? So, as you can tell, this is now going to be the final part where it comes to defeating all these enemies scenario before we move on to Mephiles Phase 2. So, as you can tell, the arena itself is based off from the Cerberus boss fight as Sonic, because obviously it's almost like a Rome Colosseum kind of vibes to it though. I mean, despite the fact that there aren't any people to be found around here, especially noticeable with all this crowded audience. So as a result, it was rather barren. Well, aside from the fact that there might be a couple of Iblis enemies, in addition to Mephiles enemies here and there, so we can pretty much expect what the actual things itself is to come. And for whatever reason, we got ourselves a motorcycle in a desert environment, and I was like, okay, that's a bit odd, especially noticeable because obviously we're going to be able to try to deal with them all in journey forms of this entire Colosseum section in journey forms within Dusty Desert portion. So because of that though, and something tells me once we deal with every single enemies on this particular segment right here, I believe the majority of the enemies will appear in journey forms of the staircase section. So but anywho, something's worth noting for as well is about the fact that also I just want to classify for something for this point. It's about the fact that we've only just got about 3 more days to go until April is about to start, like I've already mentioned about this before. So generally speaking, it's about the fact that also we've only got about, let's just say, 7 days left until we've decided able to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of the film's release of the Super Mario Bros. Movie. To be more specifically, released in 2023. And let me tell you, we will definitely try to able to mention more about it, for able to try to look back on the films of the Super Mario Bros. Movie at some point if we decide able to tackle through very hard missions in Journey Forms of Sonic 06, just to know about the fact that if you'd be curious enough to see what specific level design actually looks like, if you manage to experience very hard mode and all that stuff, despite the fact that, well, it is kind of unfortunate for those of you ever experienced the Xbox 360 version of Sonic 06 until when it gets to the point until by the end of July in 2024. It will be kind of unfortunate about the fact that every single pieces of DLC for Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, specifically for those of you who lived in America, that it will be unfortunate enough about the fact that you won't be able to actually access the forms of the entire DLC of Sonic 06 until by the end of July in Journey Forms of this year, like I said earlier, because no matter what though, it's about the fact that despite Sonic 06 is incredibly lacking with backwards compatibility onto Xbox One, including Xbox Series X/S, unless if you're trying to able to actually access the emulator, well, that might be difficult to explain. But apart from those side of things though, luckily for the UK owners, I think anyway, in addition to Japan owners as well, they can still able to actually access to DLC in Sonic 06, but on the PlayStation 3 version. So because of that though, yeah, it's gonna be pretty sad able to see the Xbox 360 marketplace is about to go away during at some point, as I said before, by the end of July, specifically July 29th in 2024. And unfortunately though, as far as I'm aware, that we've only just got about, let's just say, 10, was it 10? Yeah, I'm pretty sure we've only got 10 days left now until the Wii U and 3DS online services is about to be gone for good, or generally though, about to shut down. So this means no matter what though, you can no longer try to able to see the online leaderboards, especially noticeable you can't able to actually experience online play. It will be hurtful though, especially noticeable in Journey Forms of not only in Mario Kart 8, although to be fair though, we can still able to actually play online in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, thankfully, on the Nintendo Switch. But at least to be more specifically though, if you do still care for the forms of the Wii U version, well, I certainly still do, but it's just about the fact that it's pretty much does have some very, very really weird menu navigation sometimes, I will admit it though right away. And on top of all that stuff though, is about the fact that the battle mode still sucks in Journey Forms of the Wii U version, which as a result, speaking of which though, is that by that time whenever we get on to May, we can pretty much guarantee to able to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the game's release of Mario Kart 8 on the Wii U. Well, mind you, no matter what though, it's been, you know, almost 10 years since the actual latest console Mario Kart game to be able to be came out. So I don't classify for counting not only Mario Kart Tour, but also with the forms of Mario Kart Live Home Circuits, just because they are both basically spin-offs of the most successful Mario spin-off series, as far as I'm aware, because usually, relatively speaking though, I just simply do not know about the forms of, well, you get the idea for this point. So, and also speaking of the forms of Mario Kart Tour anyway, is that, yes, the next tour we're about to be going on to is that we're going back into the Yoshi Tour, which means we're going back to Yoshi's Island. So because of that though, still very curious, able to actually look back on the forms of the tour version of Yoshi's Island racetrack, even though despite the fact that it's been overshadowed by the forms of the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe counterparts, because I can still able to enjoy that amazing track in Journey Forms within a booster course pass after all in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, just because of all that amazing fanfare and you name the rest. So, oh jeez, we have to do a continuous homing attack chains, just like the forms of how it does on a regular boss fight. And also I just realized that certain NPCs, specifically both Rouge and E123 Omega, does not show up in Journey Forms of this entire mode. And this also includes with the forms of not only maybe Tails, but also with maybe for Knuckles as well in Boss Attack Sonic. And I'm pretty sure once we get to Silver's Boss Attack though, I'm pretty sure that Blaze is not going to appear either. So no matter what though, yeah, that's as far as I was trying to able to explain about the forms of the absence of, you know, the NPCs and all that stuff though, which as a result, yeah, you get the idea for this point. So there we go, Boss Attack Shadow is completed, and no way! I've got myself my glorious S rank. That is really top notch right there. So with that being said, folks, is that we get the endings of this point right here. So join me next time for more Let's Play of Sonic the Hedgehog 2006. In terms of DLC, is that we're about to tackle through boss attack Silver. So I'll see you guys until on Monday. Later, fellas.